The carriage wheels struck a rut in the frozen road, and Adarin's forehead knocked against the window hard enough to bruise. She barely felt it. She had been watching the pines for an hour, counting them as they dissolved into the fog, trying to mark the moment her old life ended and whatever came next began. Somewhere between the 6th mile and the 9th, the land had stopped belonging to House Morvain. Somewhere between the 9th and the 12th, it had begun to belong to him, the broken Alpha King of Drakarn, the man who had not shifted in 7 years. The man whose first mate had been found dead in a birch grove with her throat open to the moon and her blood frozen black into the snow. The man whose howl, it was said, had cracked stones the night he learned of it, and whose silence since had been so complete that travelers crossing his borders spoke only in whispers, as if any louder sound might summon the ruin of him. And her stepmother had sold her to him. Adarin closed her eyes. She could still see Vesperine as she had stood in the drawing room the night before. Pale hair pinned high, rings glittering, voice so smooth it might have been announcing the supper menu. The terms are favorable, Adarin. You leave at first light. Do not make a scene. Celise is already inconsolable. Celise, the precious daughter. The one with gold curls and a laugh like bells, who had wept prettily into a lace handkerchief while Adarin's world ended in 3 sentences. A debt, Vesperine had said. A very old debt. The House of Drakarn was owed a daughter of Morvain, and the daughter had to be given, and Celise was too delicate, too promised elsewhere, too beloved. So it would be Adarin, the girl who was not quite a daughter and not quite a servant, whose mother had died when she was 4, whose father had followed when she was 11, leaving her to a woman who had never pretended to feel any tenderness for her at all. She had not wept, not in front of them. She had walked up to her narrow room under the eaves, folded 2 dresses into her mother's old travel case, and sat on the edge of the bed, with her mother's silver pendant pressed to her lips, until dawn came gray against the window. She would not give Vesperine the satisfaction of tears. She would not give Celise the satisfaction of a farewell. The carriage lurched again, and through the glass Adarin saw the fortress. Her breath stopped. Drakarn rose out of the mist like a wound in the mountainside. 4 black towers, a wall of weathered stone older than the pines, no banners, no torches, no welcoming procession. Only iron gates shut against the morning, and above them a carving of a wolf with its head thrown back in a howl that had no sound. A wolf that could not be heard. Adarin pressed her palm flat to the cold window, and the silver pendant at her throat grew warm against her skin for no reason at all. The carriage stopped. She could hear the driver speaking in low tones with someone beyond the gate. She could hear the creak of hinges. She could hear her own heart, loud as a drum against her ribs. Then the door swung open, and cold air poured in, and a woman's voice said quite gently, "You may step down, my lady." My lady. No one had ever called her that. She gathered her cloak around her shoulders, took her mother's case in her hand, and stepped down into the courtyard of the broken Alpha King. The woman who had opened the door was old and small, wrapped in a shawl of dark wool. Her face was kind in the way winter is kind, bare, honest, without decoration. She inclined her head a fraction and turned to lead Adarin across the cobblestones. Adarin followed, her legs trembling beneath her. She had been told, her whole life, what to expect of Drakarn. She had been told the king kept no household. She had been told the courtyards were empty. She had been told the fortress was a tomb, and its master a ghost wearing a man's shape. But the courtyard was not empty. There were children, 3 of them, not more than 7 years old, chasing a wooden hoop across the cobbles with the shrieking joy of children anywhere. They did not flinch when they saw her. One of them, a boy with flour on his cheek, lifted a hand in greeting, then ran on. Beyond them, a stable boy was humming a tune she half remembered from her own childhood. Further still, 2 washerwomen laughed together as they pinned linen to a line, their voices easy, their shoulders loose. The courtyard of the broken Alpha King was full of life. Adarin stopped walking. The old woman ahead of her paused, turned, waited without impatience. "I was told," Adarin said, and her voice sounded foolish in her own ears, "that no one lived here, that he had sent everyone away." The old woman's eyes crinkled at the corners. "People say many things, my lady. Some of them are even true." She turned again and walked on. Adarin did not move. The pendant at her throat was warmer now. Not hot. Not burning. Only warm, the way a river stone grows warm in the palm. But there was no sun. The sky was the color of iron, and the air was cold enough to bite. Somewhere behind her, at the far end of the courtyard, a wolfhound began to bark. It was not a snarl. It was the sharp, joyful, astonished bark of a dog who has seen a friend it did not expect. She turned. The hound stood at the base of the northern tower, ears pricked forward, tail high, its whole body aimed at her like a drawn arrow. And behind the hound, half in shadow and half in the gray morning light, stood a man. Tall, dark-haired, very still. She could not see his face. She could only see that he had gone as motionless as a stag at the scent of wolves, and that his hand, resting on the hound's collar, had closed so tightly around the leather that it creaked in the quiet. And then, quite softly, in a voice pitched to carry across the courtyard and nowhere further, he said her name. Adarin. Not her title, not my lady, not the girl from Morvain. Her name. The name her mother had whispered to her on the last night of her life. The name Adarin had never given to a single soul since, because it had been her mother's and her mother's alone, and she had kept it safe for 14 years. She did not know how he knew it. She only knew that her pendant was burning now, and the sky above the towers had gone darker in the space of a heartbeat, and somewhere beneath her ribs, something she had never felt before had opened its eyes. 3 weeks passed at Dracarn, and after that first morning in the courtyard, Adarin did not see the broken Alpha King again. Not in the long halls where she learned to find her way without lamps. Not at the evening meal, where a place was always set for him and never filled. Not in the library with its cold hearth, where she took to sitting in the afternoons because the quiet there felt less like punishment and more like permission. She had been given a room. She had not expected a room. She had expected a cell or a cot among the servants, or perhaps nothing at all but a corner of a stable and the cold kindness of animals. Instead, she had been shown to a chamber in the eastern wing, with walls the color of cream, and a bed piled high with furs, and a window that looked out over the birch forest where the wolves of Dracarn had once run in their thousands. This was hers, the old woman had said on the first night, and Adarin had not needed to ask whose. The old woman's name was Nessa, and she had grown quieter as the days passed, watching Adarin with something that was not quite pity and not quite hope. On the 4th night, Adarin had dreamed of a wolf. It was not a dream she remembered clearly on waking. Only fragments, eyes the color of dark honey, a forest she had never walked, a sense of enormous sorrow, so wide it felt less like a feeling and more like a country. And one small, impossible sound, a wolf trying to howl and finding only silence, and trying again, and finding only silence, and trying again. She had woken with her face wet. She had not told anyone. By the end of the 2nd week, she had begun to notice things that did not fit. The household was smaller than it should have been, but it was not broken. The people smiled when she passed them and nodded, and seemed, against all the stories, to be glad that she was there. Bread appeared at her door in the mornings, still warm. A cloak lined with fur had been left on her chair one evening without a note. And once, when she had cut her finger on a rose thorn in the dead garden, she had looked up to find a boy of perhaps 9 watching her from behind a column, holding out a folded cloth. They knew something about her that she did not know about herself. She was sure of it. And somewhere in the fortress, the man who had said her name was staying out of her path on purpose. She saw him properly on the 15th night. She had gone to the window, unable to sleep, drawn by a restlessness she could not name. The pendant at her throat had been warming for hours, and outside the snow had stopped falling, and the moon was full and high and bright enough to throw shadows across the inner courtyard below. A man stood in that courtyard. He wore no cloak. His shirt was open at the throat. His dark hair fell across his forehead, wet with melting frost, and his hands hung at his sides with the terrible stillness of someone holding himself together by will alone. He was alone. He was trying to shift. Aderin understood it the way one understands grief in another, without being told. She watched his shoulders gather. She watched the tension run down through his arms and into the cobbles. She watched the moonlight strike his face, and she watched him wait, head bowed, for something that had not come to him in 7 years. Nothing came. After a long time, he made a sound. It was not a howl. It was the broken half-beginning of one, a breath that tried to become a voice, and then folded in his throat. His whole body shuddered, his hands curled, and then he stood very still, looking down at the stones, as if he were ashamed of himself. Aderin's cheek was against the glass. Her pendant was searing hot. Below her, in the courtyard, the broken Alpha King lifted his head as though he had felt something. He looked up. He saw her. He did not move. He did not speak. He only looked at her for what felt like a very long time, and his eyes, even from that distance, even in that cold light, were the eyes of the wolf in her dream. Dark honey, enormous sorrow. Then he turned and walked away into the dark. She did not sleep at all that night. In the morning, Nessa brought her bread and hot cider and set them down on the small table by the window, and did not leave. "You saw him," Nessa said. Aderin did not lie. "He cannot shift," she said. "Why?" Nessa's hands folded over each other in her lap. The old woman seemed to weigh something in herself, and then to set it down carefully, as one sets down a cup of water that is full to the rim. 7 years ago, Nessa said, he lost his mate. She was not his fated one. The bond between them was young and gentle, and they had been happy. When she was killed, something inside him tore. His wolf did not die with her, but it went somewhere he has not been able to reach since. He walks as a man only. He cannot run. He cannot howl. He cannot be what an alpha is meant to be. And the pack has held him up out of love, and he has held them up out of duty. And no one, in 7 years, has known how to give him his wolf back. Aderin's throat had closed. "Then why am I here?" she whispered. Nessa did not answer right away. She reached, instead, into the pocket of her apron and drew out a folded paper and placed it on the table between them. "This came to the fortress 3 days before you did. It was not meant for you to see. The king has not opened it. I have." Aderin looked down at the paper. The seal was her stepmother's. She did not want to touch it. She touched it anyway. She unfolded it with fingers that did not feel like hers. The letter was short, and it was not in Vesperine's usual careful hand. It had been written in a hurry, as if the writer had wanted to be done with it. "The girl is moon-touched, as her mother was. Her blood remembers what yours has forgotten. The old stories are true. She can bring it back to him. What the old stories do not say, and what I am telling you now, is that the bringing back will cost her everything she has. She will not survive it. You may have her for this purpose and no other. Do not return her to me. The debt is paid." Aderin read it twice. She read it a third time. The room had gone very quiet around her. The fire in the hearth had stopped crackling. The pendant at her throat was cold now, cold as a coin of ice against her skin. Moon-touched. Her mother. Her blood. She looked up at Nessa, and her face must have shown something terrible, because Nessa came around the table and knelt at her knee and took her hand, the way her own mother had once done when she was 4 years old and afraid of thunder. "He does not know," Nessa said. "He does not know what your stepmother wrote. He does not know what you are. He will not know unless you tell him, child. He brought you here because a debt was offered, and he could not refuse it without war. And he has been keeping himself away from you because he could feel, from the first moment in the courtyard, that something in him recognized something in you, and he was afraid of what that meant. He has already lost one woman. He will not be the reason another dies. Aderin could not speak. Her mother. Moon touched. The name her mother had whispered on her last night, the pendant warm against her skin every time the king came near. The dream of the silent wolf that had been the same dream as his. Her stepmother had not traded her to save Celise. Her stepmother had traded her to be consumed. A horn sounded in the distance. Nessa's head came up so fast the old woman's shawl slipped from her shoulders. A second horn. A third. Closer. Nearer. From the outer wall. "That is the watch," Nessa said, rising to her feet with a speed that did not match her years. A fourth horn, and this one was not a warning but a scream. "That," Nessa whispered, "is the gate." The door of Aderin's chamber slammed open before Nessa had reached it. A young man stood in the frame, breathless, his sword already drawn. His eyes found Aderin, and relief moved across his face so fast she almost missed it. "My lady, you must come. Now." "What is happening?" Nessa demanded. Riders. 30, perhaps more. They came through the eastern ford under the banner of truce, and when the gate opened they cut down the two men holding it. His jaw tightened. "They are inside the walls. They are looking for someone. They are asking for her." He meant Aderin. They were asking for her by name. Aderin's knees almost gave out beneath her, and she steadied herself against the edge of the writing table, and in that moment the letter from Vesperine fluttered off the surface and landed face up on the stones, and she understood with a clarity colder than the morning that her stepmother had not trusted the old debt to do its work alone. If the bringing back would not kill her, Vesperine had sent men who would. "The king," Aderin said. Her voice did not shake. She was almost surprised by this. "Where is the king?" The young man's face darkened. "The king is in the courtyard. They have gone to him first." Nessa made a low sound of fear. "Take me to him," Aderin said. "My lady, my orders are to hide you. Take me to him." He looked at her. Whatever he saw in her face made him turn without another word and lead her at a run through the corridors, down a stair, through a gallery where tapestries had been pulled from their rods, past a window broken inward with a spatter of dark blood on the sill, and out onto the colonnade that overlooked the inner courtyard. Aderin stopped at the rail. Below her, the courtyard was a scene out of a nightmare. 6 of the king's men lay on the stones. Some were still moving. Others were not. A ring of riders in black leather surrounded a single figure at the center, and that figure was the broken Alpha King, unarmed, bleeding from a long slash above his eye, standing between the attackers and the door of the servants' hall, because on the other side of that door were the children she had seen playing hoops in the courtyard on her first morning. He was holding them off with nothing but himself, and he was losing. Aderin did not remember deciding to move. She only knew that her hand closed around the rail, and the pendant at her throat went white-hot, and something beneath her ribs that had opened its eyes 3 weeks ago opened its mouth. Light poured out of her. It was not golden. It was not the warm, gentle, healing glow of the old stories she had half heard as a child. It was silver. Silver like the inside of the moon. Silver like the blade of a sword pulled out of cold water. It rose off her skin in a slow, terrible radiance, and the silver pendant at her throat lifted itself from her chest on its chain and hung in the air before her like a small second moon. The riders in the courtyard turned their faces up toward her, all of them, at once. The light struck them. They screamed. It was not a burning scream. It was a scream of unmaking. Aderin felt it the way one feels a stone dropped into deep water, the ripples going out, and she understood without being told that what her blood did to the things her stepmother had sent was exactly what her stepmother had counted on it doing to her. She made it stop. She pulled the light back into her ribs, gasping, and she looked down. And the men in black leather were on their knees in the courtyard with their hands over their faces, and the broken Alpha King was standing in the center of the ring looking up at her. not at the light, at her. His face had changed. The stillness that had held him like a shroud for 7 years had cracked straight down the middle. His mouth was parted. His eyes were wide. And as Adarin watched, his shoulders drew back and his head tilted and his whole body went taut, with something she recognized at once, because it was the same thing she had watched him fail to do by moonlight in the courtyard below her window. He was shifting. Only this time, it did not fail. The sound that tore out of him was not a howl. Not yet. It was the raw, wrenching, almost human cry of a man whose soul had been returned to him after 7 years of being held under the water of his own grief. His bones moved, his skin went dark, his clothes split. And where the broken Alpha King had stood, a wolf the size of a warhorse rose up onto 4 long, trembling legs and lifted its head and looked at the men on their knees. The howl, when it came, shook the stones. It was answered. From the forest, from the hills, from the towers, from every direction at once, voices lifted into the morning that had not spoken in 7 years, and the wolves of Drakarn, scattered and silent since the night their alpha had lost his wolf, remembered that they were a pack. Adarin's knees buckled. The young man beside her caught her elbow. Below, the wolf that had been the king moved through the riders with a speed that did not look possible, and it was not mercy, and it was not rage. It was only the clean, terrible verdict of an alpha whose house had been entered and whose people had been wounded. It was over very quickly. When the last rider fell, the wolf turned, and it looked up at Adarin on the colonnade. And it began to change again. She went down the stairs, one hand on the wall, the other pressed to the pendant that was now only faintly warm. The young man did not try to stop her. By the time she reached the courtyard, the wolf was a man again, on his knees on the bloodied stones, his head bowed, and breathing like someone who had forgotten how. Adarin knelt in front of him. He did not lift his head. "You," he said, and his voice was hoarse and ragged and not quite steady. "You are not what they said you were." "No," she whispered. "I am not what I was told either." He looked up. Dark honey eyes, enormous sorrow. And now, underneath the sorrow, something new and raw and frightened, because he had just felt his wolf come back to him after 7 years, and he knew exactly who had given it back. And he knew, the way she knew, that no common bloodline could have done such a thing. He knew what she was, before she did. "Adarin," he said, the way he had said it in the courtyard 3 weeks ago. Her true name, her mother's last name, the name she had kept. "Who told you that you were nobody?" She could not answer him, because somewhere behind them, in the doorway of the servants' hall, a small voice she did not know said, "My lady, you are bleeding." And when Adarin looked down at her own hands, she saw that the silver had taken something from her after all. Her fingertips were white, not pale, white, the color of bone, the color of the moon in the instant before it sets. And she understood, quite calmly, what the letter had meant when her stepmother had written that the bringing back would cost her everything she had. He carried her. Adarin did not remember being lifted. She only remembered the cold stones beneath her knees and the small voice saying she was bleeding, and then his arms beneath her shoulders and under her knees, and the world tilting as he rose and took her out of the courtyard with the careful, terrible gentleness of a man carrying something he was afraid to break. He did not take her to her chamber. He took her to his. It was a room she had not seen. Dark wood, a wide hearth where a fire had been built high, a window looking east over the birches. He laid her on the bed and drew the fur coverlet up over her legs, and then he sat on the edge of the mattress, and he took her left hand in both of his, and he turned it palm up to the firelight. Her fingertips were still white. He looked at them for a long time. "Tell me," he said quietly, "what the letter said." She did not ask him how he knew there was a letter. Something had been opened between them in the courtyard that did not close with the closing of the door. He had felt it too. He had the grace not to pretend otherwise. She told him, every line, every word, moon-touched as her mother was. Her blood remembers what his has forgotten. She can bring it back to him. The bringing back will cost her everything. Do not return her to me. The debt is paid. She had expected rage. She had steeled herself against it, because men of his kind were known for rage, and because her whole life had taught her that when men were angry at what women had done to women, the women present were somehow the ones who paid for it. He did not become angry. He became still. It was a stillness different from the one she had watched in him for 3 weeks. That other stillness had been a kind of holding, a man keeping himself upright around an absence. This was a gathering. She could feel, even with her eyes half closed, the way something in him was collecting itself into a single point, and she understood, with a small cold thrill, that this was what he had looked like once, before he had lost his first mate. This was the alpha. "Adaryn," he said. She opened her eyes. "My name is Caliph," he said. "I have not given it to anyone in 7 years. I am giving it to you now because I want you to have a weapon against me, should you ever need one. And a name is the oldest weapon there is." Her throat closed. "I have not been a good host," he went on. His thumb moved, very slowly, along the inside of her wrist. "I knew what I felt in the courtyard when you stepped down from the carriage. I did not know what you were, but I knew what my wolf did, even silent, even buried. He knew you. He tried to come up to the surface of me for the first time in 7 years, and I pushed him back down, because I had already been the reason one woman died of standing too close to me, and I would not be that reason again." "You did not kill her," Adaryn whispered. "You did not." "I did not hold the knife." "No." His mouth tightened. "But she was in a birch grove in the middle of the night because she had gone looking for me. Because I was away at the northern border when I should have been with her. Because I had taken my pack to a fight that could have waited a month, and it could not wait in the end because I chose the fight over the wife. And she did not sleep well when I was gone, and she walked. She walked in the forest to calm herself, and someone had been waiting for her to walk in the forest for a long time." The fire crackled. "Someone," Adaryn repeated. "Someone who has spent 7 years making sure I could not find out who. Someone who knew, the way your stepmother knew, what my wolf was worth, and what it would cost me to lose it." He looked up at her. His dark honey eyes were clear. "Someone who is not your stepmother, Adaryn. Your stepmother is a cruel woman and a greedy one, and she would sell a daughter for a cup of wine if the wine were good enough. But she is not the architect of this. She has been used. As you were going to be used. As I was used." Adaryn's breath caught. "Who then?" "I do not know yet. I know only that there is someone above her in this. And that person has been waiting 7 years to make sure my house would fall. And that person has just learned, along with the rest of the world, that my wolf has come back." He closed his hand around hers. Gently, gently. "Which means that whatever comes for us next, comes for us because of what you gave back to me this morning. And I need you to know, before anything else I say to you, that I am not sorry for what you gave back. And I am not going to let it take you the way the letter said it would." She made a sound. She did not know if it was a laugh or something worse. "Caliph, look at my hand." "I am looking at your hand." "Look at it." He did. Her fingertips were still white, but the white had crept down to the knuckle of her index finger, further on her ring finger. The nail of her smallest finger had gone the color of old ivory, and there was no feeling in it at all when she pressed it against his palm. "It is climbing," she whispered. "The letter said the cost. It did not say the cost was all at once. It said everything I have, one piece at a time." Caliph did not move for a long moment. Then, very carefully, he lifted her hand to his mouth, and he pressed his lips to the white knuckle of her ring finger, and she felt something pass between them through the bone. It was not healing. It was not his wolf. It was older than either. It was a promise, made in a way men with his kind of voice had made promises for 1,000 years, with the mouth and not the word. Then we are going to find out who set this on you, he said, low against her skin. And we are going to take it off you, and whatever is left over, at the end of it, of you and of me, is going to belong to us. Do you hear me, Adarin? I hear you. Say my name. Caliph. He closed his eyes. Once more. Caliph. His whole body shuddered, the way it had in the courtyard on the night she had watched him fail to shift. Only now it was not failure. Now it was the settling of a man who had been held together by duty for 7 years and had just been given permission to be held together by something else instead. The door opened. Nessa came in without knocking. Her face was gray. She did not look surprised to find them together. She only set a small, sealed scroll on the table by the fire and said, in a voice that was not steady, "A rider. Under the white flag. From the capital." Caliph's head turned. "What does it say?" "I did not open it. It is addressed to the king, not to me." He let go of Adarin's hand with a care that undid her, and crossed to the table, and broke the seal, and read. She watched his face. She watched the exact instant the last color went out of it. "What?" she whispered. "Caliph. What is it?" He did not answer her at first. He read the letter twice, then he folded it, once, and once again, and he set it back down on the table, and he turned to face her, and his dark honey eyes had gone as cold as the sky above his towers. "The capital has fallen," he said. "The Regent Council has been dissolved. A new hand sits on the high seat, and that hand has proclaimed at dawn this morning that the broken Alpha King of Drakarn is a traitor to the realm for consorting with a witch of moon-touched blood. My lands are forfeit. My title is stripped. My people are to be brought under the banner of the new seat before the next full moon, or put to the sword." Adarin could not speak. "The name signed at the bottom of this letter," Caliph said, "is the name of the man who has been waiting 7 years, and it is not a name I expected to see." He crossed the room to her. He knelt beside the bed. He took her whitened hand in his, and he did not flinch from the cold of it, and he said, "Will you ride with me?" She thought of the carriage, and of Vesperine's voice announcing the supper menu, and of her mother's pendant, and of the silent wolf in her dream, and of the small voice in the doorway of the servants' hall saying, "My lady, you are bleeding." "Yes," she said, "I will ride with you." They left Drakarn at moonset. Caliph would not let her ride alone. He lifted her onto the saddle in front of him and wrapped his cloak around them both, and for the first league she did not lean back against his chest because she did not quite believe she was allowed to, and for the second league she did. And by the third, the pendant at her throat had warmed to the temperature of a living thing, and his arm around her waist had steadied into the quiet certainty of a man who had decided something. 200 riders went with them. Nessa had wept when she saw that number, not from fear, but from gladness, because 200 was more than had ridden out of Drakarn under its alpha in 7 years, and every one of them had come at a single word from him. The pack, Adarin understood, had only been waiting. They rode hard through the night and into the gray hour before dawn. Caliph spoke to her as they rode. He told her about his first mate. Her name had been Seren. She had been a miller's daughter from a valley east of the capital, and he had met her when he was 22, at a harvest fair, and he had not known she was anything other than a girl with flower on her sleeve until he had looked into her eyes. They had been bonded within a season. She had been killed within 3 years. He did not pretty any of it. He told her that he had loved Seren, and that Seren was not what Adarin was, and that he had loved her anyway, with the whole of what he had been at 25, and that losing her had not been the same shape as what he felt now when he looked at Adarin, and that she deserved to know the difference before he asked her to become anything to him at all. "I am not asking you to be her," he said, quietly, into her hair. "I know," Adarin said. "I am not asking you to be mine, because my wolf came back when you stood on the colonnade. I know. I am telling you who I have already been, because I will not have you give yourself to a man whose past you do not know. My first wife was a good woman and I failed her. You should know that I am a man who can fail a good woman. It is not a thing I hide. She turned her head against his chest. Caliph. Yes. The letter from your capital. Whose name was on it? He was silent for a long time. Varin of Halloweth, he said at last. My mother's brother. The last of her line. The man who stood as regent in my name when I was a child, and who swore me into my alpha when I was 15. The man who walked me to Seren's grave and held me up when I could not stand. The horse beneath them moved steadily on through the cold. He killed her, Adarin said. She did not ask. I think so. I did not know until this morning. 7 years of silence and I did not know. He had me persuaded it was raiders. He had me persuaded that the guilt was mine, which kept me small and quiet and unwilling to shift and unwilling to lead and unwilling to marry again, which kept the high seat empty, which kept him close to it. Caliph's voice was low. He has been patient. He has been very patient. And today, with the capital taken and my wolf returned in the same morning, he has decided that patience has run out. And my stepmother is his creature. Has been for years, I think. She sold her husband's daughter to him through me, because she was promised Celise would sit on the high seat beside him when the dust settled. I doubt he has any intention of giving her that. But she will not know until it is too late. Adarin closed her eyes. Celise. Stupid, pretty, cruel Celise, who had wept into her handkerchief and let her stepsister be sold to a man the capital called broken. Celise, who did not know that the man she was being promised to was the man who had killed his own nephew's wife, and who would have no more hesitation about killing a new wife when her use was done. She found, to her small and cold surprise, that she did not want Celise to die for that stupidity. We need to get to the capital, Adarin said. Yes. Before the full moon? Yes. He will have the high seat by then. He has it already, Adarin. We are not riding to take it from him. We are riding to pull him out of it. They stopped once, at midday, in a hollow between two ridges, and she got down from the saddle, and her legs did not quite hold her, and Caliph steadied her, and did not comment when the whiteness had climbed one more knuckle of her left hand. He had a strip of dark silk in his saddlebag. He tied it around her hand, loosely, hiding the white, and he said, Not because I am ashamed, because I do not want you to have to look at it every time you lift a cup. She nodded. She could not speak. By dusk of the second day, they came within sight of the city. Adarin had never seen it. She had been raised in the north, in a small manor, and the capital had been only a word to her, a word that meant where important things happened to other people. Now it rose out of the plain ahead of them, a tiered city of pale stone with the high seat at its crown, and she saw at once that something was wrong. The banners on the walls were not the banners of the realm. They were black. Not the black of mourning. The black of a new house laying claim. A silver tree had been stitched into the center of each one, and she did not need to ask whose sigil the tree belonged to, because Caliph's arm around her had gone rigid. Halloweth, he said. He has not even waited for the full moon. A rider came out to meet them under the white flag. It was a young man in Halloweth's livery, his face pale and his hands shaking on the reins. He would not look at Caliph. He addressed his message to the air between them, and his voice was the voice of a man reading a script he had not written. The Lord Regent Varin of Halloweth, Keeper of the High Seat, does welcome the broken Alpha to the capital under terms of parley. He bids you come in peace. He bids you come with no more than 10 retainers. He bids you know that the witch of moon-touched blood who rides at your side is a guest of the capital and will be housed accordingly. He bids you know that 34 persons of the former Regent Council are currently held under his hand, and that their continued living depends on your presence in the Great Hall by dawn. Caliph said nothing. The messenger swallowed. He bids you know, lastly, that one of the 34 is the Lady Celise of Morvain, who was delivered into his keeping 3 days ago by her mother, and who has refused food since learning of her circumstance, and whose condition is not improving. Adaryn's hand tightened on Kayleith's. Celise. Stupid, pretty, cruel Celise. Being starved in a tower by the man her mother had promised her to. Adaryn thought, very clearly and very simply. No. No, she was not going to let Celise die in a tower at the hand of Varin of Halloweth. Not because Celise had ever been kind to her, not because Celise deserved to be saved, but because she, Adaryn, had been a girl once who had been handed by a woman who did not love her to a man who was meant to destroy her, and something in her had refused to be destroyed, and she was not going to leave another girl in that same arithmetic. She looked up at Kayleith. His face was stone. The 34th hostage, she said, is my stepsister. I know. He named her last on purpose. I know. He wants me to come. Yes. She looked back at the black banners on the pale wall, and at the messenger who would not meet their eyes, and at the city rising behind him like a trap that had already been sprung and was only waiting to be entered. Then I will come, she said. Kayleith fought her. He did not fight her in front of the messenger. He sent the messenger away with the reply that the broken Alpha of Dracarn would be at the Great Hall by dawn, and then he dismounted in the hollow of a stand of black pines a quarter league from the walls, and he set her down on her feet and took her by both shoulders and said, No. Kayleith. No, Adaryn, not this, not alone. He will not kill 34 people if I am in the hall. He will kill 34 people if I am not. And you already know this. I know he will use you. I know what men like him do with women who have given back what you gave back to me this morning. I know what he will try to take from you in that hall. And I know what it will cost you when he tries. Kayleith. She lifted her right hand, the one that was still her own, and she laid it flat against his chest, and she felt his heart under her palm. And she understood something she had not understood an hour ago. I am not asking your permission, she said. I am telling you what I am going to do. And I am telling you, because I love you, that I am going to need you to trust me for the length of a morning, even though every part of you is going to want to break that hall apart to reach me, because if you break that hall apart before the right moment, he will kill the 34, and he will kill Celise, and he will kill me, and he will still be sitting on the high seat when the sun sets. He had gone very still at the word love. He did not move for a long breath. Then he leaned his forehead down against hers, and he closed his eyes, and he said, You are the most difficult woman I have ever loved, Adaryn of Morvain, and I have loved exactly too. She laughed. It was not quite a laugh. It was close enough. Tell me what you need me to do, he said. She told him. She spoke for a long time, quietly, in the dark between the pines. And when she was done, he nodded once, and he lifted her back onto the saddle. And they rode the last quarter league to the capital with their hands linked between the two horns of his saddle, and he did not speak again until the gates opened for them. She was separated from him in the outer court. She had expected it. She did not flinch. She was taken by 4 of Halloweth's men, with a courtesy that was not courtesy, through a set of corridors she had never walked, to a small antechamber lined with dark wood, and she was left there alone for an hour before the doors at the far end opened and a man came through. He was tall, and he was old, and he had Kayleith's mouth. She had not expected that. Of course he had Kayleith's mouth. He was Kayleith's mother's brother. She had not thought about it. Now that she saw it, it turned her stomach over, because it was the mouth of a man she had already decided to love, being used as the mouth of a man she had already decided to see hanged. Adaryn of Morvain, said Varin of Halloweth, at last, come. He did not touch her. He did not need to. There were 4 men behind him and a corridor of guards beyond the door, and Adaryn knew the weight of being moved through a place by men without being touched, because she had spent 14 years in Vesperine's house being moved in exactly that way. She walked where he gestured. He brought her to the great hall. 34 people knelt along one wall of the hall, their hands bound in front of them, their faces pale with a fear that had had time to harden. Adarin's eyes found Celise at once, because Celise was at the end of the line, and Celise had not been given time to harden. Her gold curls were matted. Her pretty mouth was chapped. When she saw Adarin, a sound came out of her that was not a word. Adarin did not look at her for long. She did not want Varen to see where her attention went. She looked instead at the high seat. It was a carved thing of old white wood, stained dark with the oils of centuries of hands. She had been told all her life that the realm was ruled from it. She had not thought, even once, that she would see it. Varen walked past her and climbed the 3 low steps and sat down on it, and for a long moment he looked at her with the patient amusement of a man who had waited 7 years for this exact minute. "You are not what I expected," he said. "I imagine not. Your mother was a small woman, quiet. I met her twice." "I know." He smiled. "Of course you know. She would have told you. Moon-touched women tell their daughters. It is the one thing I could never persuade any of them to stop doing." He leaned forward. "Give me your hand, Adarin. The left one, please." She did not move. "Adarin. No. You came here to save the 34. You came here to save your stepsister. You came here to save my nephew. You did not come here for yourself. Give me your hand, or I will begin with your stepsister, and you will watch." She thought, "I am done running." She thought, "He is going to try to take it out of me the way the letter said it would come out of me." She thought, "Caliph. Now." She did not look at the door. She did not look at the high windows. She did not do anything that would give away what she had told Caliph in the dark between the pines. She stepped forward, and she climbed one of the low steps, and she held out her left hand to Varen of Halloweth. The silk was still tied around it. He untied it himself, with the slow, almost tender fingers of a man who had been looking forward to this. When the silk came away, he drew in a breath. The white had reached the base of her fingers. Her whole left hand looked in the lamplight like something carved out of moonstone. It did not hurt anymore. That was the worst part. It had stopped hurting 3 hours ago. "Ah," said Varen softly. "So it has begun?" "Yes." "You understand what you are?" "I understand what I am." "You understand that what you are is meant to be given, not kept." "I understand what you think I am." He looked up at her. Something in his face moved. He was not a stupid man. He could feel, across the small distance between them, that she was not what he had been told she would be, and for the first time in the conversation he was not amused. "Give me the rest of it, Adarin," he said, "and I will let the 34 go. I will let your stepsister go. I will let Caliph live, and I will let him crawl back to Dracarn. And you and I will sit on this seat together, and the realm will have a queen who can speak to the moon, and no one will ever again have to be afraid of winter." "No," she said. "No. I am not going to be given. I am not going to be kept. I am not going to sit on a seat beside the man who killed Seren." He went very still. "I am going to do something you did not plan for," Adarin said, and she looked him in the eye, because her mother had told her once, long ago, that the one thing moon-touched women were never supposed to do was look a thief in the eye, and she had decided between the pines that she was tired of the rules of moon-touched women. She put her whitened hand flat on his chest. She did not give him her light. She took his. Whatever he had stolen from Seren in a birch grove 7 years ago, whatever he had stolen from Caliph through 7 years of quiet lies, whatever he had stolen from the 34 by bringing them to this hall in chains, she pulled it out of him through the bones of his ribs, because the old stories had said moon-touched blood remembered what his had forgotten, and it turned out that what his had forgotten was that what can be given can also be called back. His mouth opened. No sound came out. The high windows of the great hall exploded inward in a shower of colored glass, and through them came wolves. Not 1, not 10. The pack. All of them. the 200 who had ridden with Caliph from Dracarn, and more, because every wolf within the sound of this morning's howl had come at a run, and they poured through the windows and over the gallery and down into the hall in a silent black tide. And at the center of them came a wolf the size of a small horse with dark honey eyes. Caliph had waited for her signal. She had given it when she took his uncle's light. She held Varin of Halloweth pinned by the palm of her whitened hand against the high seat, and she did not look away from his face as the hall filled with the rescue she had planned, and when she finally did speak to him, her voice was soft. "You should have let the moon alone," she said. The wolf that was Caliph reached the high seat. The last thing Varin of Halloweth saw was his sister's mouth, on his nephew's face, on the muzzle of a wolf that had come back to itself because of a girl he had not bothered to be afraid of. It was, on balance, a fair ending. The wolf did not strike him down. Adarin had half expected that, had braced for it even, the way one braces for a roof to fall. But the wolf that had been Caliph stopped at the foot of the high seat and lifted its great head and looked at her, not at Varin, and she understood that he was asking her a question. Asking whether the killing belonged to him, or to her, or to no one at all. Varin of Halloweth was gasping beneath her hand. He was not dying. She had not taken enough for that. She had taken only what he had taken from others, which was a great deal but not the whole of him, and what was left in him was an old man with his mouth open and his eyes wet, and his lie finally stripped off him like a cloak that had never been his. Not his death, Adarin said quietly. His judgment. Let the realm see what he took, and from whom, and let the realm decide. The wolf beneath her dipped its head once. She took her hand off Varin's chest. He slid sideways on the high seat like a doll whose stitches have all gone slack. The wolf beside her made a low sound in its throat that was not a growl, but something close to a word. And 3 of the pack came forward and took hold of Varin by the collar and the arm and the waist, and drew him down off the seat and laid him on the stones, and he did not fight them, because there was no fight left in him at all. The hall had gone silent. Adarin turned slowly and looked along the line of hostages against the wall. Someone had already begun cutting the bindings. She saw Nessa, who had come through the broken windows with the pack, because of course Nessa had come, moving down the line with a small knife, freeing wrist after wrist. She saw the 34 people stumble to their feet, some of them weeping, some of them too emptied to weep. She saw Celise at the end of the line, on her knees still, her bound hands in her lap, her gold curls matted flat to her skull, looking up at Adarin with the face of a child who has just understood that the fairy tale she was told is not the one she is in. Adarin walked the length of the hall to her. Nessa stepped aside. Adarin took the knife from her without a word and knelt down on the cold stones in front of her stepsister and cut the rope at her wrists. Celise made a small sound. "Stand up," Adarin said gently. Celise did not stand up. Celise fell forward against her instead, and Adarin caught her, because she was still the stronger of the 2 of them, even with her left hand the color of carved bone. And Celise began to cry into her shoulder, the way a very young child cries, without grace and without restraint, and without any attempt to be pretty about it. "I did not know," Celise whispered. "Adarin, I did not know what she was. I did not know what he was. I did not know what they were going to do to you. I thought she only wanted me to have a good match. I thought you were being sent somewhere safe. I thought..." "Hush." "I let her do it. I cried and I let her do it. I let her do it because I was afraid, and because she has always frightened me, and because I thought if I did not cry, she would trade me instead. And I..." "Celise." "Hush." Celise went quiet. Adarin held her for a long moment because her stepsister was not a woman she loved, and had never been a woman she loved, and she was not going to pretend otherwise. But Celise was also a girl who had been sold in her own way, and Adarin had decided in the hollow of the black pines that she was not going to leave another girl in the arithmetic of women who sold each other for crumbs at the tables of dangerous men. "You are going to go home to your mother," Adarin said into Celise's hair. and you are going to tell her what was done here. And when the magistrates come for her, which they will, you are going to stand beside them and speak against her. And you are going to be believed because you were there. Do you understand me, Celise? Yes. Do you understand me? Yes, Adarin. Good. She stood. Her knees almost did not hold her. The wolf that was Caliph was beside her, suddenly, its massive shoulder steadying her hip without touching her where the white had climbed. She had not seen him cross the hall. She put her good hand into his fur, because she needed to put it somewhere, and the fur was warm, and she felt through her palm that his heart was beating very fast. Caliph, she said. The wolf shuddered beneath her hand. The shift came back over him more slowly this time, the way a river returns to a bed it has been remembering. She did not look until he was a man again, and even then she did not look at him straight, because the moment she did she was going to break, and she needed another half-minute. Someone had brought him a cloak. He fastened it with one hand. His other hand came up and cupped the side of her face. Adarin. Yes. Look at me. She looked at him. He was smiling. It was a small smile, and it was crooked, and it was the first she had ever seen on him, and she understood for the first time in her life what people meant when they said a smile could be a whole country. You are still standing, he said. Barely. That is enough. Nessa came to them. Nessa had brought a strip of clean linen and a cup of something warm that smelled of crushed herbs and something sharper beneath. She put the cup in Adarin's good hand, and she wrapped the linen around Adarin's bone-white fingers with the care of a woman who had done this kind of wrapping before. And she said quietly, "We are not done yet, my lady. The taking can be reversed, but it has to be reversed tonight." Adarin looked at her. "The old stories," Nessa said, "are almost true. They say the bringing back will cost the moon-touched girl everything. They do not say that what is taken from her has somewhere to go. What you gave back to the king this morning did not leave the world. It is still in him. It has been in him since the courtyard. And because the bond between the two of you has been opening ever since, what is in him can be opened back to you, if he is willing, and if you are willing, and if the bond is sealed tonight." Adarin's throat closed. Sealed how? Nessa looked at Caliph. Caliph did not drop his eyes from Adarin's face. "The old way," he said. "Not a wedding, not a contract. A claiming, given and returned. Bitten and bitten back. It is the oldest right my people have, and I have not offered it to anyone, not even to Seren, because with Seren I was young and afraid and I thought we had time. I am not young now. I am not afraid now. And I do not have time. I have tonight. And I am offering it to you, Adarin, here on this floor, in front of these witnesses, because I do not want you to spend one more hour wondering whether what was given back to me belongs to you, because everything that was given back to me belongs to you, and I would like the realm to know it." She was crying. She did not know when she had started. She did not particularly care. "Yes," she said. "Yes, what?" "Yes, Caliph." His hand shook against her cheek. They did it on the floor of the great hall, not on the high seat. Caliph would not go near the high seat. They did it at the foot of the 3 low steps, kneeling in a circle cleared by the wolves and the 34 and Nessa and Celise, who had stopped crying and was holding herself very straight because Adarin had told her to. A fire was lit in the central hearth that had not been lit since the old Alpha King last sat the high seat. Someone brought a cup of clear water. Someone brought a cup of red wine. Someone brought a piece of black bread. These were set between them on a square of white linen, and Caliph, who had clearly done this in ceremony 100 times for other people and never for himself, spoke the old words in the old tongue, and Adarin did not understand the words and did not need to, because the shape of them was the same in every tongue. "I see you. I know you. I choose you. I will not unmake this." He took her good hand and turned it palm up and bit, gently, into the soft mound at the base of her thumb. It did not hurt. It was the carefulest violence she had ever felt. Then he offered her his own wrist. She had never bitten a living thing. Her mouth did not know how. Her teeth did not know how. But the wolf under her ribs did. The one that was not a wolf, and had never been a wolf, and was something older than wolves. And it guided her mouth to the place on his wrist where the pulse jumped under the skin, and she set her teeth, and she broke the skin, and she tasted him. What happened next did not happen in the hall. It happened somewhere further in. She was on a ridge of pale stone above a forest she had never walked. He was beside her. The forest below them was full of wolves in full cry, and every wolf had the voice of a woman or a man she had never met, and she understood without being told that she was hearing the whole of his line, and that his line was hearing the whole of hers, and that the two lines were introducing themselves to each other in the way lines introduce themselves, which is not through speech. She saw Seren. Seren was standing at the edge of the ridge, small and quiet, exactly as he had described her, a miller's daughter with flour that had never quite come off her sleeve. Seren looked at Aderin for a long breath, and her eyes were the eyes of a woman who has had 7 years to think about what she would say if she were ever given the chance. "Take care of him," Seren said. "I will." "He is not as strong as he looks." "I know." "He is stronger than he thinks." "I know that too." Seren smiled. She raised her hand. She stepped back off the edge of the ridge, not in falling but in going, the way a candle goes, and the wind where she had been was warm. And then Aderin was back in the great hall with her teeth on Calith's wrist, and her left hand under the linen was on fire. Not pain. Return. She broke the bite and pulled back, and they looked at each other across the square of white linen, both of them with blood on their mouths, both of them shaking, both of them alive. Nessa took the linen off Aderin's left hand. Her fingers were her own color again. The nail of her smallest finger was still the color of old ivory, and it would stay that way for the rest of her life, and she would be glad of it, because it was the mark of what she had done, and what she had almost paid, and what she had, in the end, been given back. Calith lifted that hand to his mouth and kissed the ivory nail, and then he put his forehead down against her good hand, and he wept, once, silently, the way a man weeps who has been taught not to, and she let him, because he had earned it. They left the capital the next morning. Varin of Halloweth was taken by the magistrates. He was tried by the assembled houses before the next full moon, and the testimony of the 34, and of Celise, and of a miller's family from a valley east of the capital who had been waiting 7 years to be asked, was enough. He was not put to death. Calith did not allow it. He was sent instead to the old stone house on the northern coast where the realm kept the men whose crimes were too large for the grave, and he lived there for 11 more years, and no one ever went to see him, and he died alone on a winter morning with his mouth open around a word no one heard. Vesperine of Morvain was stripped of her husband's name and her house and her rings, and she was sent to work in the kitchens of a small convent in the south, where she lived another 20 years, and she was not cruel to the younger women there, because she had finally learned what it cost to be cruel to a younger woman. Celise returned to the manor. She did not marry. She took in 3 orphaned girls from the village and raised them, and she was a better mother than she had been a daughter, which is the only kind of redemption available to most of us. The broken Alpha King of Drakarn was not called the broken Alpha King again. He was called Calith, by those who had earned the right, and my lord by those who had not. And the new banners of his house, stitched by Nessa and by Aderin and by 3 of the washerwomen from the courtyard, showed a wolf howling at a moon, and the moon was silver, and the wolf was dark, and the old carving above the gate, the wolf whose howl could not be heard, was taken down and put in the crypt, because it was no longer true. Aderin was called the Lady of Drakarn, and later the moon touched, and later, when the new children came, Mother. There were 4 of them, in the end, 2 girls and 2 boys. The eldest, a girl, was born on the first night of the second winter after the capital fell. She had her father's dark hair and her mother's eyes, and a small white crescent at the base of her left thumb where no one had bitten her, because some things skip a generation and some things do not. The youngest was a boy, born 10 years later, who did not shift until he was 15, and who, when he finally did, shifted into a wolf the color of moonlight on birch bark, and Caliph wept the second time in his life, on the night he first saw his youngest son run. The pack of Dracarn never fell silent again. The capital was given to a council, not to a king, because Caliph had decided somewhere in the hollow between two ridges that his family had held the high seat for long enough. He visited it twice a year. He never sat on it. Adarin sat on it once, at the request of the council, to settle a matter concerning the moon-touched girls of the realm, of whom 3 had been found in the first year after the fall and 7 more in the second. And she wrote, from that seat, the law that bears her name, that no girl of moon-touched blood could be given, sold, traded, bargained, promised, or spoken for by any hand but her own, from the hour of her first breath to the hour of her last. It is still the law. The pendant her mother had given her was taken off, finally, in her 40th year, and buried under a birch at the eastern edge of the Dracarn forest, because she had decided she did not need it anymore. And she did not. And her daughters did not ask for it, because they did not need it either. The tree grew tall. It is still growing. She and Caliph had 41 years together. He went first. He was not a young man when they met, and she had always known she would be the one to stand at the grave, and she stood at it when the time came, and she did not weep, because she had wept on his shoulder many times across 41 years, and she had decided that the last of her weeping for him would be done where he could still hear her, which was during, not after. She lived 9 years more. In the last of them, her youngest son and his wife brought their first child to her room, a girl, 2 days old, and laid the child in the crook of her arm, and Adarin looked down at the small sleeping face and saw, at the base of the little left thumb, a faint white crescent no bigger than a grain of rice. She smiled. Well then, she said softly to the child, to the room, to the wolf she could hear on the ridge above the fortress, the one that had been waiting for her for some time now. We are still here. She closed her eyes. The wolf on the ridge came down. Outside, in the courtyard where once a man had tried and failed and tried and failed to shift under a winter moon, the pack of Dracarn lifted their voices, and the voices carried. And a miller's daughter on a pale stone ridge in a forest that no living eye had ever walked turned her head at the sound, and smiled, and stepped forward to meet them. They had been found, all of them, against every arithmetic that had been drawn up for their undoing, and they would not be undone again. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this story stayed with you.